Welcome to X-Connect the show. My name is Kareem Kanji and I'll be your host for today. Thank you for joining us today. If you want to watch future past episodes, please subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/xconnecttv. Big thanks to Big Time Design and Communication for all of our design and web work, and to Shaolin Chung, who's sitting on the other side of this camera. And if you want to be an X-Connect supporter, please send us an email at xconnect@thirdocean.com. We have a lot of commercials here, but we're almost done. Now, for the important part, from April 27th to June 11th, X-Connect will be taking on the education sector with our EDU Connect series, EduConnect, in which X-Connect will be profiling and interviewing various industry insiders and professionals within the education and technology space. EDU Connect will address topics such as the impact of mobile devices and applications, and the learning environment, the usage of social media in classrooms, and gamified learning approaches. Most importantly, EDU Connect will discuss how school boards, faculty, students, and teachers are responding to such technologically driven changes and other challenges, successes, opportunities within Canada. A highlight of the EDU series will be the EDU Connect event held on May 30th from 6 to 10 p.m. The event will feature a panel discussion led by forward-thinking members of the education and technology industries and center around the way that education is changing and the impact that technology has on these changes. The panel will include Paul Lambert, CEO of Madigo, Justin Medved, Director of Innovative Learning at the York School, Joseph Wilson, who is the Education Advisor at the Mars Discovery District, Kyle Acers, who is a science teacher at Greenwood College School, and it will be moderated by Our Digital Life's Ramona Pringle. To register for the event, please visit educonnect.eventbrite.com. I am excited to finish all the announcements and get to our guest for today. He is a partner at Spongelab Interactive. We have with us Jeremy Friedburg. Very quickly, his bio: he holds an honors, a Bachelor of Science in Genetics from Western Ontario University of Western Ontario. And actually, I could call you doctor, shouldn't I? Because you have a doctor. Jeremy's fine?
Yes, Jeremy's
yeah, well, you've got a doctorate in molecular genetics and biotechnology from the University of Guelph. He's been extensively involved in scientific education outreach programs, teaching students and the public about genetics and cell biology, and consults on a number of textbooks and major interactive educational exhibits created for the general public. Jeremy has taught for 10 years at a number of Ontario universities, including the University of Western Ontario, Guelph, Wilfrid Laurier, the University of Waterloo, and U of T. In 2003, he founded Vive Technologies, pronounced correct?
Yeah, Vive Technologies.
Vive Technologies, a company that focuses on educational computer games and scientific communications. Currently, he is a partner in Spongelab Interactive, a Toronto-based company devoted to immersive learning through educational games and interactive media. That's the end of my notes. How are you, Jeremy?
I'm well. Thank you for the invitation.
Well, thank you for coming in and for spending some time with us. I guess the first question that comes up, you got a background in genetics, and now you're a co-founder of two, I guess, tech companies. How does one make that change, or what prompted you to make that change?
Well, you don't see how that leads into...
Oh, absolutely not.
Yeah, the short story is, it started when I was a graduate student, and I did a lot of teaching, and I loved teaching, but one of the things I learned very early on that I was actually horrible at teaching, and started to build better tools to help me engage my students. And it started there, it eventually just blossomed into consulting work and then design work, and I started my first company as a graduate student, and then in early 2007 I met my current business partners and formed Spongelab Interactive.
Fantastic. So you're a founding partner?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, I mean, what was that interest? Like, what were you working on? What were you doing that, technology kind of came into the picture? And even more specifically, the whole idea of gaming.
Well, I mean, gaming means so many different things to different people.
Okay.
You ask someone what kind of games are you into? I play soccer, football. I'm into computer games. You say the word gaming means a whole bunch of different things to different people, but there's a very large and very strong community of people who developed educational games or employ game-based learning. And we think of this as something that's really new, but it's not. It's been around forever. Chess, very popular game, something like 7 million worldwide official players in chess.
Sure.
It evolved originally as an educational game. It was over 6,000 years old. It was developed to teach military strategy. It was developed to be able to train someone in being able to read your opponent. Can I sit here and strategize and figure you out and beat you? It was how you train military leaders in the old days. And it was powerful because it focused on the concept of what is the most important skill that you should get out of your education system. What would you say is the most important skill?
I would say continued learning. That's what I would say. Although it seems that when I look back, there was a lot of focus on memorization.
Yeah, and there's a huge focus on it. What I'm really interested in, there's a large community around this, is the concept of critical thinking and creativity.
Okay.
After your 17 some odd years in the education system, what you should have mastered is those two skills.
Okay.
If you can do it, you can do anything. It doesn't matter what profession you're going into, business, education, whatever you're doing. If you can apply those two skills, thinking critically and being creative with solutions, you can do anything. So, I mean, we're now looking at that in terms of education, and we've been doing this for a long time. All throughout human evolution, this idea of game-based learning and working together and playing out scenarios has been around for a long time. In the computer space, this is nothing new. We've been doing this for 40 years. And a great example is how we started training pilots differently and using game-based simulators.
Okay.
And it's a really good example because those who were training pilots are interested in some very important things. They're not interested in whether you pass the test and all the bits and pieces of the airplane. What they're interested in is that when you're actually in a plane and you're at 32,000 feet and something goes wrong, you stay calm. Can you think critically about what's going on, be creative with a solution, and do it in 3 minutes? And so those simulators were looking at those core characteristics. Can we both teach that and can we assess that capability? And what it turns out is those environments, yes, you can do that in a very profound and powerful way. And what started in training pilots has filtered over into every aspect of military training, oil rig workers, doctors and surgeons, and what Spongelab has been focusing on is bringing those kind of techniques into the mainstream education system. And we have enormous problems in and around that.
So how long has Spongelab been around? How long have they been focusing on solving these problems?
So Spongelab has been around since 2007.
Okay.
I've been doing this for a long time, since back in 2003. But really, there was a long learning curve for me to truly understand the intricacies of the problems that are at hand. And what does this really mean? And when it comes to gamification, what really is that? And how does that play into this whole design problem? And education is a very complex structure.
Yeah.
And there's no simple, here's the package, there it is, and it works. Because everybody's different, and everybody's mind functions different. And just like we're making evolutions in healthcare, that we're finally getting to the point where really the best way to go is personalized healthcare. Your body is different than mine, your needs are very different than mine, and education is the same way, that we have to be able to take every mind as an individual and adapt to the individual. And that's very much where the gamification of the system comes into play as well.
Interesting. And so one of the questions that can follow from that is, you're talking about, individualized education.
Yes.
And how, I don't know if you guys have had just talks or discussions with formalized education, so like with school boards or universities, and the application of some of the things that Spongelab has been working on, and how that can potentially fit into standardized curriculum.
The problem is, well, take the example of training pilots.
Okay.
We know how to do this really well. But when we do it in that situation, it's like you sign up for pilot school, you go through the classroom stuff, and then we're going to put you in this multi-million-dollar facility, and that's where that game-based learning happens. We don't have that luxury in education. In fact, we have an entire spectrum of pretty crummy technology. And we also have this institution of education where there's a whole massive structure. You can't, anybody who thinks and say, well, I've got the solution, we're going to change education overnight, they're deluding themselves. You have to develop approaches that work with what is doing and help motivate and incent certain behavior changes at all levels. And that's really where the game design begins. Because the game is not just, here's the cool simulation of the cell, we're going to play it, we're going to win, we're going to learn how cells work. But it's about stitching it together with everything else. Because one of the big problems is not that, well, I need a better game or a better textbook. They're all components. And this experience of going to school is all about, well, how do I connect the game with the textbook, with the animation, the field trip, the laboratory? How do I stitch this thing all together at the same time bearing in mind curriculum, assessment, and all the other things I have to do as a teacher? And really, you know, my tiny short day, I'm just trying to get home and see my kids at the end of the day. And it's how do you stitch it all together? And Spongelab has been working on building the core technologies behind it, so engine technology and platform technology to stitch all those elements together, as well as developing game-based learning content to integrate with that framework.
Interesting.
Because a game on its own is just a component.
Of course.
It needs a framework to help connect it to all these other resources, both physical and digital.
Yeah, absolutely. Earlier on, you talked about you know, how Spongelab has developed numerous games.
Yes.
Obviously, you know, we're talking about, you know, these games. The purpose of it is to teach various things. Are there, so my first question on that is, are there certain, I guess, verticals or subjects that, you know, Spongelab is more focused on or has ended up doing more work in? You know, you talked a lot about flight simulation.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious if you know, what sort of things are...
I mean, games are great at doing some things really, really well and doing other things really, really poorly. And that's part of good game design, is figuring out what is right for the content, but also right for the user, but not just the user, but the user in a particular environment. So, you know, how does an educational game function when we're in a classroom environment, we're in this building with all kinds of peers around me? What should we be doing in that environment versus I'm on my own at home, or, you know, I'm in a group project, or so. Good design takes all that into account, but I'm by no means a proponent that, well, let's just plug everyone in. The whole world will be a game, and then, you know, we'll plug you in, and you'll come out after high school. And but you know, it's like if you're going to study forest ecology, for example, go to a forest. I mean, there's no better way to study that than be in a forest. You know, the smells, the sights, the textures, you can't recreate that. But when you start to talk about how the bacteria in the soil are affecting nutrients in the roots of plants, that's very hard to do, and that's where a game and a simulation come in. It takes things that are often very complex or abstract and gives tangible meaning to it. With a game in a digital environment, I can put you inside of that soil bacteria. I can put you on another planet, and there's elements where you can do that, and that's where it's really ripe in education. In professional communities, it's elements where there's elements of risk. Why train in simulators? Well, if you're training in airplanes and you make a mistake, it's pretty costly. Same thing with doctors. You know, it's like, you know, if you know, the simulators are not there to teach the routine surgery. It's when you're doing the routine surgery and all of a sudden your blood pressure in your patient drops, you have no idea what's going on. Can you deal with that? But it allows you to train with an element of safety, but it still has the elements of realism so that you can still get that experience.
Interesting. What sort of applications or examples can you give in terms of people utilizing some of the platforms that Spongelab is putting together?
What we have our current platform is actually the second version of our platform. It was released last August, and since then it's in over 140 countries.
Wow. And
we have like an active monthly user base of 50,000, and we've also gained some very interesting communities that we didn't really know.
Interesting.
There. So the platform is there again to help stitch things together. It's very powerful from that perspective. So it allows for the multiple different modes of implementation in the education system, and it is incredibly streamlined so that it has universal accessibility on almost every device. You can even use it on dial-up. You know, we are really focused on the idea that there are a lot of remote communities that we still want to provide content to. So, but in terms of the implementation, the use of our games, it's really quite broad. As an example, we released a game called Build a Body. Build a Body, it's beautiful. Basically, you have to assemble organ systems, assemble them together, build a body, then see if you got it right, and then things start to go wrong with your body. And then you got to deal with how to correct them and how to fix them. So it's kind of a fun. It's a game-based simulation. It's not your typical think of a computer game, but it was built for high school and university audience. So high school, intro college, university. And interestingly enough, we released a prototype for iOS and on the iPad, and we started to get a following of 4 and 5-year-olds. We're getting a lot of parents writing into us, telling us like their kids love this, and you know, I've got a 4-year-old daughter who can't put it down. She loves this, and you know, from a design element, conventional wisdom thinks, well, you need the pink elephant, the fluffy bunny to teach kids, but
sure,
maybe not. Maybe that photorealism, that grossness, that wow, it works for them. So she's at the age, she's curious. She knows food goes in, stuff comes out, and I want to see all the bits and pieces that make that happen. So we're learning a lot in that respect.
That's amazing. A little bit on that, you talk about you're in so many different countries. So I'm curious, are there, like how you were surprised that you got 4- and 5-year-olds via their parents, playing with the iPad game. Are there certain countries that there's the usual suspects at the top, but maybe there's countries in there that you say, wow, I didn't realize that there's a lot of uptake from these guys.
The U.S. is still our largest market, but that's probably because of proximity, and we're in that market. And Canada is still number 2, UK is number 3, but we've identified a lot of new communities which are growing rapidly, like Brazil. There's a rapidly growing community in Brazil. There's some amazing things going on there. In terms of educational gaming, they're one of the largest producers now of game-based learning. And then it comes from some very strong federal commitment to education and some initiatives to re-engage youth and get them back in the classroom and really get them hooked into learning. And so, there's some really interesting markets that are growing that we really didn't anticipate.
Are there certain games that you find are more popular?
Yeah. I mean, our games that we build, and we've released, I think, almost just under 100 titles in our platform, but they range completely to things like that will be considered very casual games, like Transcription Hero. It is a game. It is somewhat of an homage to Guitar Hero, but you're the enzyme that copies DNA and transcribes DNA. So you're riding along the rails of DNA, but the nice thing about this game is you can plug your Guitar Hero controller into it, and we coded each key on the guitar.
You're kidding me.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
Oh, wow.
So I mean, it's a very fun, casual game where you can use a really cool input device and has very limited utility, but does very well what it was designed to do, to connect with some very high-level concepts in and around the process of DNA transcription. And to also talk about how powerful and amazing these little molecular machines are. They're fast. Like the enzyme that does this process, if it was as big as us, is moving over 100 kilometers an hour.
Wow. And
its error rate is 1 in half a million. I mean, it's pretty impressive little molecular machines, and that's kind of how we get that attention. Let's talk about this. What are the implications? As you make mistakes on the guitar, they turn into mutations in your sequence, and what are the implications of that? And it opens the discussion. And that's sort of one end of some of the casual games that we do. There's Biochem Gems, which is somewhat of a tribute to Bejeweled. And then there's things like the Build a Body, which is sort of game-based simulations. And then there's things like the History Biology game, which is a very powerful game. It's got a AAA quality to it, done beautifully in 3D, but it deals with bringing all the different disciplines together and wraps it up with a very compelling storyline that deals with not just the science and the discoveries, but the people, who they were, the political and social cultures of their times, and how that influenced what they did. And the game is structured like a web scavenger hunt, so there's stuff you do in the interface, you have to go online to do your own research, and you encounter things like fake websites we planted, like auction sites and art galleries, real websites like government sites, museums, and fake websites, real websites that are hosting fake content for us. So it's this blended reality experience where you actually have to solve these problems and really put your skills to the test. And it's a phenomenal game. It's beautifully crafted and really compelling in storyline.
That's very interesting. I want to take a step back from Spongelab and talk more in general about education and technology. I mean, I remember in school, both ends of the spectrum. One, there being these Mac computers in the classroom, in a special computer lab classroom in school. And then on the other side, I remember in maybe grade 10, doing a project and, getting our first family computer and creating a pie chart on the computer, giving it into class, and having the teacher say, no, you have to do it by hand, And so you've been in the classroom, albeit at the university level, for 10 plus years. What sort of changes have you seen, number one? And number two, what can the role be, at the, before post-secondary, so the secondary institutions of education?
Wow, that's an enormous question. There's a lot in this. I mean, people say there's a lot of horrible things going on in education. They'll complain about this and complain about that. All else being equal, we're still getting a pretty good level. We're getting a good education here. There's certainly lots of things we can do better, and there's certainly a question of what role does technology have in the classroom. It's really about utility. It's about what are we trying to do? What are we trying to accomplish in the education system? What is the end goal? What is the end goal for a student? What should you have gotten out of this experience? Now, one would say, I got this piece of paper, and this piece of paper gets me a ticket into the next phase, and go on. I've already talked about things like critical thinking and creativity. Those are really important to me and quite a lot of other people. So, how does the technology deal with some of those things? So, I love the idea of tablet devices going coming into classrooms.
Yeah.
But I'll be horrified if they come in to just read digital textbooks. The real power in bringing technology like that in the classroom is collaboration.
Yes.
Where we use these devices that are all networked together to get students creating.
Yeah.
And
rather than just consuming.
Right. And I see I see these robotics programs as a great example. These kids are investing hours of their lives building robots. The amount of creativity, critical thinking, application of knowledge, there it is. There's your net result. That is your exam. That is the result, and that's what you want to be able to do. And so the technologies should be there to support that kind of evolution of what you're doing.
Where does Spongelab go from here? What's next? I know you guys just, the website says beta, and sometimes I think companies just put that on there just in case they screw up. They say we're in beta. But what's next for Spongelab? What are some of the challenges you guys are looking to solve?
Well, we're looking at what to do with technology at all different levels. And this comes into the discussion of the gamification of education, but really takes a step back to look at what are the needs at all the different levels in this system, because everyone has different needs. What are the needs of the student? What are their motivations, and how do you reward and incent those? What are the teachers' needs, and how is that different? What are the administration's needs, and also what are the needs at a government level? What do we need to help make this system run? And there's a large part of this is what data can do for you. And one of the neat things about these technologies is we have a really powerful understanding of not just learning, knowledge acquisition, engagement, performance, but digital learning culture. What does that look like? What does that mean? And being able to use that data to really help make better decisions, and decisions in real time. And that's what Spongelab is really focused on. And that involves elements of gamification, and that there's a whole other discussion there, and a lot of emotions on different sides to that. But it really looks at using these technologies at their fullest, and data is a key component to that.
So wrap-up question, more on the personal side. You have a 4-year-old?
Yeah, a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old.
A 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. Okay, so I have a 6-year-old. And so he's in love. He picks up the tablet and he goes straight to Angry Birds. If the tablet's connected, who doesn't, right? And if it's connected, he'll go to YouTube and watch Transformers videos and things of that nature. As a parent, what sort of, and I'm sure there's a little bit of sway that you have at home saying, honey, you need to play this game. Whether it is from Spongelab or not, but I'm sure you're more, you're taking a look at it from a different vantage point. You're not just a parent, but you're a parent that's involved in the education field, as well as using applied technology for that purpose as well. What sort of games or what sort of things are you pointing your children at?
Right now I'm kind of pointing them at doing all kinds of different things. Okay. There's a lot to be gained from games, but but sitting all day in front of a game is not a great thing. We grew up in the Atari Nintendo generation.
Yes, right.
It's like would our parents have ever thought you could have a career in video games? No, absolutely not. But if you were a competitor in the National Nintendo Challenge, whatever it is, well, all of a sudden that training becomes very valuable. But it's like anything else. It's moderation. There's a utility for it. And, even us as adults, we have these mobile devices, and we're probably connected to them far too much than we actually need. And we all recognize that there needs to be some kind of a balance in there. And so the technology is is powerful. It can do some great things, and it can engage a child in a very different way, but it's by no means the only way. And so it's about integrating that with all these other experiences.
Yeah.
And being outdoors is just as valuable as being indoors. It's the different things you do.
Absolutely, absolutely. Jeremy, thank you so much
My pleasure.
for joining us, for coming by, and I hope to see you on May 30th
Great.
at the EDU Connect panel. And if you want more information on that, please go to educonnect.eventbrite.com. My name is Kareem. Thank you so much for joining us. Bye-bye.